This episode of Mikey on Mute is brought to you by Little Jerk Society. Little Jerk Society is a clothing company fueled by the raw energy of creative rebellion, celebrating those who march to the beat of their own drum. They care deeply about mental health and believe in a world where everyone can thrive, regardless of their challenges. Use promo code Mikey on Mute to save 15% on your order at littlejerkclothing.com. Again, that's littlejerkclothing.com. And remember, use promo code Mikey on Mute, all one word, to save yourself 15%. Go off and make a change. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mikey on Mute. As always, I'm Mikey, coming off mute to share my mental health journey story with you. We're getting so far into it, and I'm getting closer to being able to talk to you guys about your journeys, and I can't wait for that. Today is episode 10. Can you believe that? I feel like we just started this journey, and here we are making the 10th episode about it. I also wasn't aware that I could talk for 10 episodes about my life, but as you know by now, once I start talking, I tend to word vomit, so this does make sense the more I think about it. Last week, you guys got the pleasure of meeting my wife, Sarah, and we talked about how we met online, how that relationship flourished, and I can't say enough nice things. It was so great to have Sarah on the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Things are looking up in our story, right? Things are going well. We're in a good relationship. We're not isolating. We're making friends. Are things going too good? It almost seems that way. And so let's throw a wrench in this. This is a story after all. We're not at the happy ending. We're at about early 2024. So we're getting pretty darn close to the present day here. And again, this story is going to continue to evolve. There's ebbs and flows, so as the story changes, I'll keep you guys updated. But I want to get you to the point where we are now so we can start talking to you guys about your journeys. You got to meet my wife last week, and now that you have gotten to see the incredible person she is and how she's helped me along, I want to tell you a story about how I almost let the healthiest relationship I've ever been in drive me to push away the healthiest person I've ever been in a relationship with. Yeah, as soon as it comes out of my mouth, it sounds pretty silly, right? Unfortunately, at that time, it made more sense to me than I'd like to admit. I am uncomfortable being in a healthy relationship. That sentence defines who I am as a person. Not entirely, but I am very uncomfortable being in a healthy relationship. I don't know what I'm supposed to do in it. I am comfortable in chaos. I'm comfortable in fighting. I'm comfortable in being around somebody that I have to constantly fight with and wonder what they are thinking and why is that comforting to me? These are things I've talked to my therapist about. Why is it comfortable for me to be around it? It's all I've known. And suddenly everything around me is starting to feel a little too uncomfortable. The Facebook groups that I had made friends and connections with, after all, I met Sarah in these Facebook groups, right? They had been there to provide me friendships and support, plenty of external validation. Suddenly, these became breeding grounds for comparison and jealousy. I couldn't scroll through the feed without overthinking something. I couldn't see Sarah like somebody's picture or comment without making up a story in my head about something that hadn't happened. I was in my head trying to find reasons to not be comfortable. In my head, I needed to pick apart what was happening because being okay, being in a good, safe environment, it didn't make sense to me. And so one of the things that I picked up right away was, okay, I am polyamorous. I've been honest about this with Sarah from the get-go. Let's pick this apart. Maybe things weren't going how other relationships do. If you look at the media, polyamory and ethical non-monogamy is typically shown to you in unrealistic types. You see threesomes happening or thruples. You typically will get it confused with things like polygamy, which you see as sister wives, things like that, which are not polyamory. Polygamy is an illegal act that is a completely different thing. But these stereotypes do help kind of navigate what we think about things. It's still in our heads about what quote unquote should happen. I was feeling held back. I felt like I wasn't getting wants and needs met, which typically is a valid feeling to bring up when you're feeling it. Unfortunately, the wants and needs that I wasn't getting met don't align with my values. They align with stereotypes. And instead of going to the one person I should have, which was my fiance at the time, I decided that I couldn't talk to her. That old habit of going on mute came back. I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want to have conflict with the person I'm in a romantic relationship with. So somehow it made sense to me to bring up these topics with other people. The connections I made in the Facebook group were the typical ones I did. I took these stereotypes of polyamory and was comparing it to my current relationship with Sarah. And I felt like I was entitled to something that I wasn't getting. And I don't know if it was my human emotion of jealousy that I thought would go away just because of being polyamorous, which now I know is not a thing. It's a very human emotion that we all have to deal with and root cause and understand why we feel the things we do. But I felt like I wasn't getting a fair shot at things, whether that's comparing how many people I had been able to either play with or date or anything like that. It didn't seem to be adding up in my favor. And again, instead of talking to Sarah about this, I was talking to other people. I was playing victim. I was expressing my concerns to people that I knew would side with me. How did I know they would side with me? I gave them my side only. We always say there's three sides to every story. There's my side, your side, and then there's the truth. I was feeding them only my side, and that's how I knew that they would side with me. I gave them evidence in these stereotypes instead of telling them how Sarah and I had customized or laid out boundaries in our own relationship. The beauty of polyamory is that you can custom build it to what works for you. As long as it works for everybody involved, there's consent and communication, then it doesn't matter what it looks like. It just has to be love. It just has to make sense and be fun and be honest. But I lost that somewhere, and I thought it had to be a certain way, and that I wasn't getting my due for not being able to be on enough dates, not being able to sleep with enough people. And I was so angry, and I played the victim really well. One thing I've gotten really good at in life, and it's not a good thing, is when I fail to take accountability, I'm very quick to come up with evidence to prove that it's not my fault. Which is a weird thing for somebody that constantly thinks that they're failing everybody else. I don't know why I'm so quote unquote good at getting defensive and coming up with excuses as to why it's not my fault or why I'm the victim, why I'm not in the wrong here. When you involve others in your talks or concerns about your relationship or things outside of the person that's actually involved with you, it's not going to end well. There are trusted people that you can vent to in certain situations, but you shouldn't just eliminate the person that you are having those issues with in those conversations. That's not fair to them. It's not fair to the other people. It's not fair to you. You pour into so many other cups. Eventually, there's going to be overflow. And what happened was that overflow came back trickling to Sarah. And she was able to get wind of it. Not from me, not from her fiance. She got to hear all about what I had been telling other people. How I mishandled the trauma that we both went through. Not ready to tell that story. But how I mishandled the trauma that we went through. How I played out as the victim and made her the villain in a story where she didn't even know she was a character. And here we have this fast-paced, intense relationship heading straight for crashing into the ground. Sarah was ready to leave. And honestly, I understand that. And I was ready to push her away and let her walk. She could have easily went back to where she was from, never spoke to me again. Neither one of us would have gone through some hardships and really understanding how to handle difficult conflict. I wouldn't have grown or gotten the opportunity to do what I did after this if Sarah didn't stay, and that is just one more example of the amazing person she is and how she has benefited my life so much. Instead of leaving, Sarah stayed and provided insight into something that would change the game as far as how I handled my mental health. We're about 4 years after the attempt now. I thought I had been through everything because I hit rock bottom already, right? I had the attempt. I was an inpatient. I thought that was the end of it. And I learned a really hard lesson, and that's that mental health is not a straight line. Your journey is going to be full of ebbs and flows. There's going to be times you're riding high and times you are way down at the ground, coming close to rock bottom again. And this was one of those low times. Thankfully, between the advice of Sarah's therapist, the experience that Sarah's had in life with her mental health journey, and other outside sources that were able to provide perspective, Sarah not only gave me another chance, but she gave me a new term that I had never heard previously. The term that would wind up changing my summer of 2024 and how I handled things and that is intensive outpatient therapy. Intensive outpatient therapy, often referred to in its acronym of IOP, is a structured, short-term, intense level of care. It's typically for mental health or substance abuse. It can also be for things like eating disorders. What you're looking at as far as the program, it's a care program that's going to be, 3 to 4 hours a day, anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks, really depending on what you need out of it. If you're looking at help on a spectrum when it comes to therapy, one side you have talk therapy, what most people think of when you say therapy. You either go to their office or you do it remotely, discuss it for 45 minutes, and then you're off until your next appointment. So that's one side, is talk therapy. The other side of the spectrum is inpatient inpatient hospitalization, which is what I was in after my attempt. You're in the hospital, you're not leaving. That's where you are until you figure out a game plan to get better. Intensive outpatient therapy is sort of in the middle of these two on that spectrum. It gives you the environment of talk therapy with the intensive care getting closer to inpatient. So it's really kind of that right meet in the middle spot. I had never really heard of intensive outpatient therapy, which led me to research because my brain loves to understand root causes. It loves to do research. When I come across a new term or phrase or reason for something, my brain wants to understand all of it. Maybe that's the hyper focus of the ADHD. Maybe that's just how my brain is wired. We are thinkers. We are, primates that want to understand how everything works. That's how we've survived up to this point. So I'm doing research on intensive outpatient therapy, and I find a hospital that provides it, that's nearby. Great news. You never know. Sometimes these programs are very limited on where you can get help at. So for it to be close within 20 minutes of me was a huge relief. I fill out the online contact form and I have to wait for them to call me back. They call me. The first step is, hey, we're going to do a intake, basically, where we talk to you and figure out where you're at with your mental health. Why are you searching for IOP? Things like that. Turns out that it's going to be a 1 hour conversation with the nurse. In this 1 hour, I give her an overview of my mental health journey, where I'm at, what are some things I'm struggling with, why do I think I need IOP, what do I hope to gain from it. After taking this 1 hour survey or intake form, she goes, okay, we'll reach out in the next couple weeks. Click. It's not really a click anymore. We live in a world where everything's a tap, but still, click. Conversation ends. And I think I have to wait weeks until I find out anything else. And that's hard for me to not have an answer. To not go, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen. Here's the itinerary. That's difficult for me. I didn't have to wait long, though, because I was contacted shortly after that. And they gave me news, but it wasn't the news I was expecting. It wasn't, hey, just kidding, in a couple weeks, IOP's ready, here you go. The news was, hey, we think you are a good candidate to have intensive outpatient therapy. However, how we do things here is that before you get to IOP, we believe you would benefit from partial hospitalization. Well, that sounds fucking scary. Partial hospitalization? Why am I in the hospital at all? Like, what is going on? I called you for therapy and you're talking about putting me in the hospital? I freaked out over that term. And I had to kind of take a breath. and ask what that entailed. Sort of like when you're doing a job interview and you ask them how what to expect on the first day, and understand that, partial hospitalization is a little bit, if we're on that spectrum where IOP was, we're a little bit closer to inpatient, because this will be 6 to 7 hours a day, Monday through Friday. You're looking at 6 to 8 weeks to complete the program. Okay, well, now I have to stop this conversation, because back when it was 3 hours a day, maybe I can work around it. Hopefully they had something after I was done working. So I was 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. That's my job. Now you're talking about 6 hours a day, 7 hours a day with lunch or something like that. And I can't do that. I work. And I'm in this weird spot of, there is help available, but it would cost me my entire day for almost 2 months at least, at the minimum. How in the world was that going to happen? And I had to look into the benefits of my job. I've paid into benefits, but the only time off I'd ever taken was PTO, or paid time off. I'd taken, short vacations. Typically they weren't long, because I'm really the only one that knows how to handle a lot of the things in my job. So the longer I took off, the harder it was for me to come back. It would just be piles and piles of things to handle when I got back. I paid into short-term disability. I knew that, but I never used it. To me, that was something that you were going to use if you were in a car accident or something happened like that. Not for mental health, right? Well, doing a little bit of research, it turns out that that's there for a reason. This comes back to that idea that mental health isn't as important as physical health, which is false. Here I was trying to talk myself out of what I needed, because I thought I didn't qualify because I wasn't physically hurt. Very mentally hurt, in a very bad place, making rash decisions. And so I had to really understand that things like short-term disability are there for you, specifically stated in most of those handbooks. So I figure out what I can do. I understand that, I can get paid a percentage of my paycheck while I'm out, so that way I'm not completely lost on money. And it was just a really hard realization that taking care of my mental health was going to take a higher priority than my work. I couldn't be people pleasing. I couldn't keep up on my looking good at work. I had to make it a priority to save my relationship, to save myself and how I live and handle myself as a father and as a human being. These things had to take priority over work. So here we are, late April of 2024, and I start my journey at partial hospitalization. It's on site, it's not virtual, so I'm already out of my comfort zone. I don't like crowds. I don't like going places where I haven't seen the parking situation before. All of these things are very much in my head as I roll up at 8 o'clock in the morning. Truth be told, early, because I can't be anywhere that's, I'm going to freak out about. I'm going to be there at least 15 minutes early. If you haven't heard me on the Ride With Me podcast with Flat Tire Andy, we talked about that. Definitely go check out his stuff. But I get there and we're on site. I sign in, meet with the caseworker. They give me a binder. It's got all the paperwork I have to fill out, all the waivers. I have to do a check in with the nursing station where they take my blood pressure. That's always skyrocket high, so that throws me through an anxiety loop right there. Here's more people that are going to talk to me about my high blood pressure. Great. And they put me in a room with a few other people, and I quickly realize that I am the oldest one there. by a pretty good portion, which is a weird feeling because I don't see myself as super old at 35. I was 34 when I started the program, but still. And I'm handed this binder, and they say, hey, well, kind of go over everything. They show me which days there's like art therapy, which days we talk about some CBT skills. They show me where a sensory room is, which was actually kind of nice. It was a place where you could go, and if you were overwhelmed, you could change the lights, you could sit and play with fidget toys, and it just kind of was a space away if you got overwhelmed. They showed me the scale from 1 to 7 based on, and they would ask you twice a day. So when you get there and when you're leaving, where's your anxiety? Where's your depression? Scale of 1 to 7, 1 being the lowest, 7 being the highest. They gave me a small composition notebook called my band book. I had no idea what that was going to be about, but they were like, we'll explain it to you. And bands were behaviors that came up when we were dealing with certain things, because this was anxiety and OCD together. That's how their program worked. They handled both people dealing with anxiety issues and OCD. And so it came up a lot with things or tics you would do based on when you are stressed. So I can only speak for my own, but you were tracking how many times you submitted to it and how many times you resisted that behavior. So very much pulled on the OCD side as far as submit and resist, but they found a way to work it in with the anxiety. So like was I avoiding things, keeping track of that. Isolation, how many times did I isolate or resist it? Rumination, how many times was I playing over and over in my head, just poor me, poor me. Negative self-talk, how many times was that happening? And then as I get on, I start to break it down even more, and reassurance seeking, how many times am I doing that incorrectly or for the wrong reasons? How bad is my comparison to other people? And another thing I learned while I was in there was that I have a tapping issue. When I get extremely anxious and I'm not able to get those feelings out, they have to come out of my body somewhere. And other than getting red and sweaty, the other thing it did is finger tapping. So my pointer and my thumb typically were what would click together, almost like I had an invisible counter in my hand. And I didn't notice that until one of the other patients at partial hospitalization pointed out and asked if that was in my band book. And so it helped me realize that I was doing that and give focus and try to understand. These numbers seemed really concerning, especially at the beginning, and I understand that's why I'm there, but to actually put numbers to it was something that my brain did understand. It loves analytics, and so I think that was helpful to get me on the right direction. Like, this is something I need to work on. And it helped me break it down, other than just negative self-talk. It helped me break it down to comparison and reassurance seeking, things like that. What partial hospitalization brought me was new tools. It helped me refresh some ones that I learned previously, whether that was through inpatient or through different therapists. And it helped me to be able to converse. Not in a way that they taught me my alphabet, but by doing things as far as how to handle my anxiety, it was making it easier to have real conversations with Sarah, which is what kind of started this, not being able to do that on my side. I had to face things that they called exposure therapy, exposing yourself to triggers that rise up your anxiety, whether that may be, a germaphobe or OCD, someone that has cleanliness OCD in a public bathroom. For me, something like changing my order at the drive-through window or starting a conversation with a stranger, doing these exposures, and then what the big thing was do the exposure, feel the anxiety, and then sit with it, which is a hard thing to do when you have multiple things going on in your head and it's racing. But just sitting with that anxiety, they had us write down on a scale from 1 to 7, where was it, how high did our anxiety spike, and how long did it take to cut it in half. So if on a scale of 1 to 7 our anxiety went to a 6, starting a conversation with a stranger, how long did it take to get down to a 3? And what that was trying to teach us was that sitting with anxiety will eventually lower your anxiety. Instead of doing things like isolation or compulsions that would make us feel safer, they were trying to teach us that existing with it will do the same thing eventually in a healthier way. They had me write a self-compassion letter. Self-compassion is something I struggle with very much, so giving myself any kind of compassion. And so to write a letter to myself like I would to a friend was a huge tool. And then after writing it, record myself speaking the letter, playing the letter back to me, eventually playing the letter for Sarah or reading it for Sarah. This helped me understand that giving myself compassion was already a trigger for my anxiety, and to sit with it so that I could understand that this is something that's going to help me down the road. It's not something to avoid. They had us kind of purposely putting ourselves in panic mode, whether that's, head between the legs or breathing through a straw for a certain amount of time, or spinning in a circle. There was a few different physical things we were doing to basically force our bodies into panic mode, into fight or flight. And that was to teach us that fight or flight doesn't mean dying. As somebody that can go into these panic modes or fight and flight over something extremely small, extremely minuscule, this spoke to me, because when you're in the middle of a panic attack, it does feel like you're dying. It feels like this is the end of everything. Nothing makes sense. So we were purposely putting ourselves in there to almost like train our bodies to say, hey, we've been through this before. We felt like this before, and we didn't die. We're good. It was quite the experience to go there I wound up being there for 7 weeks. Met some really interesting people. Like I said, it was really, in a way, rewarding to see that these people were taking care of their mental health way before I ever did. It was refreshing to see these 20-somethings taking it seriously, because I hadn't taken my mental health seriously in my 20s. I really wish I had. So it was really cool to see that. It was an experience that really taught me to let go of expectations that I had to be at work, that I had to just deal with these things on my own, and show me that there were multiple other resources out there. It provided a new outlook on how therapy was going with my caseworker. Doing art therapy taught me so many things, as far as it's not just talk therapy. There are so many different outlets to handle your different mental illnesses. And so after 7 weeks, they transferred me to what this whole thing was supposed to start at, which was intensive outpatient. So I had to go back to work and say, like, hey, I'm still going to be off. I need to do this other program and figure out how long I can extend my short-term disability, because I need to still work on this. At this point, I had put 2 months in. I needed to finish this journey. And so I did virtual intensive outpatient for about 3 or 4 weeks. I'm trying to remember exactly how long I did it. It might have been, I think it was at least 4. So 4 weeks of intensive outpatient. I was still off of work. And what that provided me was, it was half the time of partial. So instead of going from 8 to 2 or 3, it was going from 8 to 11, giving me most of the day to be off work and go out and do exposures on my own and live life. It was really nice and refreshing to be able to just have that time with Sarah, to be able to have that time and not worry that I need to fill it with work. It provided me a perspective on my job, and that it's just a job, and at the end of the day, it can't be the thing that runs your life. This hospital gave me a new therapist, well, a new psychiatrist, and then I wound up switching therapists based on a recommendation from my fiance at the time, my wife now, to where she goes, a different therapist than she sees. But I walked out of this situation with a psychiatrist whom I hadn't had since I was an inpatient 4 years prior, because I let my family doctor do all of that, and a therapist that was going to challenge me in a way that I hadn't been challenged before and push back. And really, I knew I needed to approach talk therapy with a whole different aspect after this. My past summer, the summer of 2024, will go down as the summer that I did something I've never done before, multiple things. I took time off of work for my medical health. I wasn't going on vacation. I was going to get myself in a better place. I went to partial hospitalization, which sounds a lot scarier than it is. I learned new ways to approach therapy and new tools to use. I got to learn how intensive outpatient works. This whole summer provided me so many different tools and perspectives, but ultimately what it did was it saved my relationship. Without partial hospitalization, I would not be where I am today. I would have not gotten the chance to marry my wife. I would not be in a spot to be able to share my story with you because I wouldn't have taken accountability for it. And so I'm very thankful for what happened this past summer. While it was a roller coaster of emotions, because no one's going to partial hospitalization and having a great time the entire time you're there. You're there to do work. You're there to work on yourself, whether that's exposures or going to therapy or, trying to write yourself a self-compassion letter or multiple other things. It's work. And so it was a roller coaster of emotions, but I cannot thank the staff there, the staff, both on site and in intensive outpatient virtually. I'm so thankful for my new psychiatrist. I'm extremely thankful for my new therapist. And so I want to end this by saying partial hospitalization is not something scary. It can sound scary, trust me. I was scared. But if it's something you need, please, please take that opportunity. The world will be there when you're back. Your job will be there. Your life will improve. This is not something you're not admitting defeat. You're being brave and admitting that you need more help than you can get currently. And so I'm a better person because I went to this. I'm a better person because my fiance at the time recommended this. So please know that this is not any kind of bash against you. This is another tool to help you along the way. And the world's better as long as you're still here and fighting forward. The world's better if you are putting in the work to figure out how to manage and navigate this crazy ass thing we call life. Please do your research about whether it's talk therapy, psychiatrists, intensive outpatient, partial hospitalization. If you need inpatient care, do your research. Find the resources. There's so many out there. And do what you got to do to stay here, because there are so many beautiful things about this life. And I don't want anyone to miss out on them because their brain gives them the wrong information. We are at a point where I am 4.5 years in after my attempt, and I still get choked up. thinking about where I was at that point versus where I am now. And I don't want anyone to feel like I did that night. So please take the opportunities out there, the resources, and make sure you continue telling your story. This brings us to the end of summer of 2024. So virtually we are caught up with my story. I have other things I will be talking about in other aspects as they come up, especially as I talk to my therapist and we bounce ideas off of each other and other things will come up. But ultimately, you now have an overview over these last 10 episodes of my mental health journey from the last however long. I want to thank you for listening, whether you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or anywhere you can listen to podcasts. I appreciate you. If you're on Spotify, please take a minute to rate it 5 stars, leave a comment, share it to somebody you think might benefit from it so we can get more people having this conversation. And ultimately, if you want to reach out to me and be a part of that conversation, please do. My email is mikeyonmute@gmail.com. You can reach out to me on Spotify. You can reach out to me on TikTok, which is Mikey on Mute. If you are on Instagram, it is Mikey on Mute Podcast. Instead of spaces, they're underscores because that's how technology works. Reach out to me there. On YouTube, it's Mikey on Mute Podcast all together. Please reach out to me. I want to have these conversations with you. I want to understand your journey. I want to talk and discuss, and let's break down that idea that men don't talk about mental health things. We do. It's important for everybody to. Let's break that stigma of toxic masculinity. Let's share stories and laughs and cry and everything together, because together we're more powerful. And I can't wait to hear from you guys. Until we get a few people reaching out here, I want to thank you once again for the last 10 episodes. I can't wait to see where this journey takes us. And I am so very proud to be connected with you. Before I get all mushy and can't make it through the rest of this, this is Mikey, gone back on mute. Until next time. This episode of Mikey on Mute is brought to you by Dubby Energy. Dubby is a clean energy drink loaded with vitamins and nootropics. Dubby is sugar-free, has 0 calories, and 0 artificial coloring. Use promo code MikeyOnMute to save 10% on your order at dubby.gg. That's DUBBY.gg. And remember, promo code MikeyOnMute, all one word, will save you 10%.